Okay, so we should be live now. So I can switch to this. And yeah, we should be ready to go. So this is roughly how we're going to be doing the stream. So you can see here on the left, I guess, of the screen, we're going to have the documents open where we're going to be actually creating the lists. So you can see here's the Airbender list. We're going to be working together to fill this up from this list of candidates that we have. So, if I have left anyone out, obviously mention them in the comments, because I feel I did a good job of putting together the short list. But again, we're getting down to a 10, so there's certain characters we know we can leave out straight off the bat. It's similar for the Waterbender list. Obviously we have a top 10, but we have much more candidates sort of in the picture, and I'll get to explaining sort of why we're going to sort of straight away leave out some of these characters as well. And the only other thing to mention there is that there are a few characters there who are either from the trading card game or the Kyoshi novels, who most Avatar fans will be familiar with, but not everyone will be. So the main sort of material I have to go over with regards to who the information on them, just full stop, is on the trading card game characters and the Kyoshi characters. So I have a document here for Kinto, Malu, Gyatso, Afiko, and for some of the Kyoshi characters, just in case you're not familiar with them, because I know not everyone has read the Kyoshi novels and so on. But there's a few people in chat now, so I suppose we'll just go over the kind of general rules. If you've ever, I suppose, had sort of discussions about this sort of stuff, you probably already know how it works. But obviously, no avatars, just because it's so difficult to just frame the character from the perspective of only bending one element. Obviously, no spiritually enhanced characters, which includes avatars, so no dark avatar. But we are going to consider Unalaq, just ignoring that section. And then no spirits or animals. So we're not going to be including Sky Bison on the air list, just for anyone wondering. In the chat, Airbender that betrayed the air nomads is Afiko, who I have a whole section on here. So that's this guy here, bringer of ill winds. Afiko the betrayer, that's him. So we'll get into explaining that once we get a little bit further down the list. So second rule, combustion benders will not be considered. Now, obviously, that is for the next stream I'm going to be doing, which will be the Earthbender and also the Firebender list. So we'll be getting to that. So combustion benders will not be considering, basically just because anytime you're trying to compare Pali and Combustion Man to any other character, it always comes down to does the character on the opposite side of the battlefield of them have any chance at avoiding combustion blasts? And it's literally just about that. And then it gets so awkward even when you're comparing characters who you would rate higher than the combustion bender. It always comes in as a factor and it makes it so awkward. Similarly, we're not going to be considering the bloodbend at all times / psychic bloodbender characters, which we'll get to in a second. The fourth rule here is just that we need to know at least something about the character. So characters like, say, background airbending masters, that'll be a big thing for this list. Characters who we clearly know are airbending masters because they have the tattoos, but we've never seen them in action, we won't really be considering them. So there's that. Again, there's leeway with all of these rules. 5, this is just what I sort of expect from sort of the strongest characters on the list, is just that they will have strong feats that we see on the screen or on the page. They'll have a strong reputation or legacy with other characters. That's their hype behind them, basically, if they're a legend, basically. And it also helps if they do have a skill set that stands out compared to other characters as well. That's what we kind of want from most of them. And then some consideration will be given to attempt to treat the characters as being in their prime, and that is mainly to avoid undervaluing the younger characters solely because of their age. Because I think in these discussions, there is a tendency to always go for the sort of old master characters as being the best above all else. And so you have to consider that, the ATLA characters especially are highly rated, and so just because Toph is 12, like, she shouldn't be like super undervalued against characters who are older when we know Toph gets older and is stronger and so on. So there's that. So we'll jump in with the Airbender list. So yeah, there we go. Airbender list 1 to 10, and here is the short list. So you can see it a bit clearer on screen here for a bit longer. So we're going to be settling on this for sort of a little bit. As you can see here, how many do we have here? So what, 16 candidates? So we're going to have to obviously eliminate 6 off the bottom of the list. We can't do that straight away, of course, because it is actually going to be easier to make the top of the list. So straight away, what I'm going to say is Guru Lahima. We do not know enough information about this character. So we are going to be straight away taking him out of contention. Now, theoretically, this is a character who should be more or less top of the list. He's a master airbender, and he knows the ability of flight. The problem is we never see him fight, and most of his character is based around him being like a guru and a philosopher. And the fact that there are certain things, like they say, like, rumors are like the second when he got the flight ability, he never stood foot back on the ground again. Does that imply like he ever fought anyone after that point? And so on. So like, I think the only reason we know he has arrow tattoos is because the statue clearly shows the lines on his head for them. That's why the T beside all the characters who have it is just to designate that they are actually a master airbender, which is a distinction that's very easy to make with airbenders. It's a little bit weirder with the other elements as to what a bending master is. Whereas here it's really clear, and there's a clear distinction between this character is not a master yet, and so on. So with Lahima out, we have Iki, Janora, Milo, Tenzin, Bumi, Gyatso, Opal, Kai, Malu, Afiko, Zahir, Daw, Jesa, Jimpa, and Kelsong. So Malu and Afiko are trading card game characters who I'll go over in just a minute. Daw, for anyone wondering, is basically one of the other harmonic convergence airbenders. So he's the guy who gets his head shaved and ends up actually using that ability quite well. So I have him here to sort of represent the rest of the new airbending recruits, because obviously Opal, Kai, Zahir stand out above all of the other ones. Daw's here to just represent that new batch that you'd say are just sort of like normal airbenders who aren't super in their primes. Jesa, Jimpa, and Kelsong are all Kyoshi novel characters. So Jesa is actually Kyoshi's mother, which is obviously a big reveal from the book. Obviously, like, full spoilers for the entire Avatar universe that we have up to this point. So yeah, Jesa is Kyoshi's mother. She was a master airbender who then became a Dao Fei, is basically Earth Kingdom bandit, and she like tattooed over her arrow tattoos to put serpents on them, and spent the rest of her life as a bandit basically in the Earth Kingdom. And so that explains that. We'll get into the explanation in a second. Jinpa is an airbender character that we meet in the Kyoshi novels. He basically acts as Kyoshi's secretary, basically just guiding her, handling her mail, like organizing her as the avatar. He is not a master airbender. It is specifically stated that he doesn't have his arrow tattoos, but we'll get to that in a minute. Kelsong is actually a member of Avatar Karuk's team Avatar, as well as sort of being Kyoshi's like father figure in the early stages of the book. He is a noted master airbender, as we'll get to, and so on. So that explains all that. And then I think the Air Kids, Iki, Milo, all these sort of characters we should be pretty familiar with. Gyatso, I actually have a little bit of stuff from the trading card game that you might not be familiar with as well, so we'll get into that. So yeah, just so we have a sense of this, we'll go straight into Malou, I guess. So you can see here's some of the cards that she's actually featured in. So you can see her here in the background of this card, Misdirection. As an orphan, Malou spent the first years of the war alone in the forest. Here's a card called Ward Off, and you can see her straight away in action here. And she's able to, spin her staff and block firebender blasts, which is quite interesting. She is a character from the Air Nomad genocide era, as we'll get to. Some say that Malou's spirit still protects the forest that she loved. There's a better look at the character, full stop. Malou, reclusive orphan. Malou's parents, Airbender monks, were among the war's first casualties. Here's some of her chamber cards, character cards, and you can see some of the techniques that she has. So she has this sort of airbending kick going on here, as well as this very interesting one, Shrieking Wind, obviously implying a airbending technique that leads to a sound effect, which we don't really see anywhere else in the franchise, which is kind of unique. And you get a look at her design there of sort of the more wintry style kind of Air Nomad clothing. So yeah, there's that. Slingshot Stream, Blustery Blast, just, that's a relatively powerful attack. Ankle Breaking Gust is meant to be her sort of best attack. It's like the rare version of the chamber card, and then just showing that she can do airbending jumps. Again, it's just to get across like what her skill set is, and then I think it has a few other cards. Yeah, in the war's early years, Malou mastered airbending skills that helped her to survive. So here's her in the trees, using airbending from the mouth, the kind of gust of air sort of technique. Hurricane Vault is a pretty cool acrobatic airbending technique against some firebender soldiers here. 10 years into the war, Malou stopped hiding and began fighting Fire Nation soldiers. So this is a character who obviously didn't complete her training at the air temples when the Air Nomad genocide happened, and escaped and hid for quite a while, but trained up to be able to combat against the firebender soldiers. So that's pretty cool. She also protects a forest, so she ended up fighting some Earth Kingdom soldiers as well. So you can see here's a pretty powerful airbending gust attack. Villagers now pay tribute to Malou, who protected the forest nearly a century ago. So you get that sense for like this is a character who had to learn on her own. So not a master airbender, but has quite a bit of experience actually, and then obviously being an air nomad from the era before the genocide, had a lot of training before that also. We'll do Afiko next. So Afiko the Betrayer. So you can see here's sort of like the end of the character. History records that in the war's 5th year, Firelord Sozin had Afiko executed as a traitor. So he betrayed his own people, and then Sozin thought he was a traitor and had him executed, which is why he is fighting here against firebender soldiers. So you can see here a direct kind of contrast of like Malou and Afiko both using a sort of gust of air from the mouth technique, but look how powerful Afiko's is compared to Malou's. That's substantial. Obviously he's a master airbender, as we can see here. So Afiko, the bringer of ill winds. And you see here, before the war began, Afiko was a traitorous monk living in the Southern Air Temple. So he was there with Gyatso and the others around Aang, I suppose, theoretically. Here's some of his chamber cards getting across some of his attacks. So Dark Tempest, you can see here, making the funnel to obviously block earth attacks. There's him just doing a casual airbending move just on his card there. This is the big one for Afiko that a lot of people tend to not really remember, because everyone is like, oh, Zahir was the first one to be shown, suffocating people with airbending, but it was actually Afiko, because this card game came out in 2005. So you can see here, Suffocating Void. Obviously it's not exactly the same technique, but it achieves the same effect, and he's using it on multiple people at once here. So again, you have sort of a similar technique to Ankle Breaking Gust here. Better look at the character there. Storms Without End, I think, is pretty cool. So that's really cool to see. Multiple little tornadoes, like we never really see airbenders do that all that much. So it really highlights, that he is absolutely a master airbender. So there's that. And then here's some of the stuff again. Afiko helped Firelord Sozin conquer the Southern Air Temple, starting the war. So this one's called Chi Absorption. I don't really read too much into the name, but look at that, just an air bubble to block pretty big earth attacks. Sign of a master for sure. Graceful leap, he's agile. Afiko led a corps of Fire Nation soldiers who hunted down the remaining Airbenders. So this is why he's involved in some of these fights, obviously. Whirling debris. So you see, once again, he's able to block effectively all the earthbending attacks coming at him. He betrayed the Airbenders everywhere and helped start the war. Tornado Punch is the last card I think I have here. Just a pretty cool maneuver. I think this is what they show him doing on his chamber card. Just the fact that it is so pointy at the end, I think is quite cool and adds a bit of something to it for sure. So yeah, that's Afiko. And then the last trading card piece of information I have is actually the Gyatso stuff. So we have here Gyatso Channel the Winds. So everyone, of course, remembers the whole, like, where we find Gyatso's body, which implies a lot about what he was able to do during the Air Nomad genocide, that he fought multiple firebenders and took them out, like, alongside himself. And that gets across how skilled he was, because he realistically must have come up against so many firebender soldiers to get to that point. So there's that. Okay, I suppose in the chat you can see here the discussion about the canonicity of the card game. My view on this and a lot of other Avatar material like this is basically that, to me, it's canon if it fits. If it doesn't fit, then it's not canon. Yes, Mike and Brian obviously weren't involved in the making of this, but they're also not involved in the making or the production of a lot of Avatar pieces of information, like Avatar extras, a lot of the extra books and stuff like that. So the way I treat it is sort of that, like, this game I don't think goes to that many extremes or takes too many liberties and feels like if it doesn't feel non-canon, in that none of the attacks feel like wild or crazy or silly. And especially with like the Afiko, Malu and Gyatso stuff, it's covering like a time period that no other Avatar material covers at all, that being the Air Nomad genocide. So I prefer that we have this insight into it rather than us not having it, in that, especially like the Gyatso section here, it feels like, okay, here's a little bit of a story that you can potentially connect onto what we know from the show, that, let's get the story that we get from this. So he's here fighting some firebender soldiers, as we can see there. Here he is, just his ally card just from the game. And there's some fun quotes here. Just because you grow up doesn't mean you have to stop having fun, and so on. Downdraft, so pretty cool. He lands and takes out a bunch of firebenders here. I love the quote on this one as well. Air and gravity are not the same thing, but a skilled airbender can make one initiate the other. So that's a very cool quote. This is a really cool one, Stifling Breeze. So it's Gyatso using a dome of air to block Yuyan archer arrows. A master airbender can form a barrier that not even a Yuyan archer can pierce. And obviously, we saw in the Blue Spirit how Aang struggled with Yuyan archers. It's also the reveal that just the Yuyan archers were heavily involved in the Air Nomad genocide, which makes complete sense, in that arrows seem like a decent counter to airbenders. But the masters can form a barrier that not even a skilled archer can pierce. So that's really cool. Stifling Wind, you can see this Gyatso just completely just blocking this guy's firebending attack with airbending. Nowhere does the novice make his inexperience clearer than in his choice of opponents. So just highlighting how much of a master Gyatso is, that he was 10 levels above any firebender soldier he encountered this day. Windmill Barrier. And this probably tells a little bit of the story as well. Don't you know better than to interrupt an old man on his morning walk? So he's just walking sort of at the foot of the Patola mountain range near the Southern Air Temple, and happens to encounter these firebender soldiers, obviously right towards the start of the attack. And you sort of get the idea that, like, it stems on from here. He fights them all the way, like encounters the Komodo rhinos, the archers, has a bunch of fights, eventually leading up to what we see his final resting place in 103. I get the impression from the cards the comet probably hasn't activated yet, but still, one airbender on his own against what looks like a full squad of firebender soldiers. Pretty skilled. So windmill dome here we have, just again, the dome completely deflecting two firebenders' attacks. Really, really skilled. So that explains those characters. So we now have a better look at Malu, Afiko, and Gyatso. So definitely, of course, Gyatso and Afiko showing why they have their tattoos. All of their techniques seem just a bit better than Malu. Malu still is good, and it's an interesting discussion to have between, say, like Malu, who technically should actually have years more training in airbending than, say, an Opal or a Kai, but ultimately we're probably going to be looking at them in or around the same level. The same goes for sort of Boomy, and even Iki and Milo, I suppose, will be in or around the same general region. So let's move on to the Kyoshi airbender characters. So I have some stuff on them here. So for the air characters, we have Kelsang up first, of course. So he is a master airbender, a member of Avatar Karuk's team Avatar, one of his best friends. He is the first of his generation to meditate into the spirit world. It was during an era where even the best of the monks didn't really know all that much about the spirit world. So Kelsang actually managing to meditate in there and having a good relationship with the spirits is actually a really, really notable thing for him in terms of just how spiritual of a character he is. He was next in line to be the leader of the Southern Air Temple, but because of this incident here, basically, as well as a few other things, like the fact that he took the Avatar relics and didn't tell anyone and used them in the Earth Kingdom, he did a few things that got him in trouble with the other elder monks. But this is the big one. Became known as the Living Typhoon after he single-handedly created a storm at sea so bad that it decimated Tulok's Fifth Nation fleet. That is a pirate fleet here, one of the more notable ones of the era. An act that kept that area of sea safe for a generation. So basically the southern sea in or around Yokoya, Kyoshi Island. Just one act did that. So that's a big example of that. The other thing I don't have here, I don't know why I don't have it here, is just that he was killed in one move by Kelsang. Sorry, by Jeonju. But Jeonju is going to be fighting for towards the top of the Earthbender list when we get there. So I don't think it's too much of an issue that, especially the way they portray the scene, that Jeonju goes for the kill straight away when they step into battle against each other. Kelsang goes to more blow him away and just kind of create distance, protect Kyoshi in the scene, and so on. You get that sort of a dynamic from it. The thing with Kelsang that I think maybe prevents him from potentially fighting super high up the list is also that we don't actually see him bend all that much. We are told about this Living Typhoon event in the past, and beyond that, his only bending instances of bending are a little bit in the iceberg sequence with Tagaka, where he's just sort of flying and then Tagaka takes out his glider and injures him with some needles. Again, it was a pretty chaotic situation. She completely turned the tables on everyone. So it's not like it's a problem that he was necessarily taken by surprise by that attack, but it meant he didn't really get a chance to really participate in the battle and so on. Obviously, again, also when he arrived at the battle to find Jeonju, he was still injured at that point. But it still is the general idea that one went for the kill, was willing to kill his old friend. One was more just blast him away to create distance type thing. They weren't fighting the same fight, is roughly the way the book sort of frames it. So he's going to be one of these characters we have to place more on sort of the reputation about this. The idea that he just flew out on his glider, whatever, and created a storm that decimated an entire pirate fleet. That is a huge scale bending feat that we've not really seen the likes of, really. So that's huge. But not a lot of the other stuff maybe makes him seem super impressive. And again, like a lot of the characters in the Kyoshi novels, they're all referred to as being sort of master airbenders, very skilled, best of their generation. Like, those type of words are used quite a lot throughout the books to describe a lot of the Kyoshi characters. I think it really fits with Kelsang, that there is a reason Karuk was willing to learn more from Kelsang, even though Karuk was arguably the more prodigious bender at the time. So that has to be brought into play. The spiritual aspect is also important, but I definitely think I view Kelsang as being a character who we have to be in consideration for I'd say for sure the top 4 slots on the list, but we'll get there. So Jinpa up next. He is a member of the Order of the White Lotus. Not that they go into it in a massive amount of detail. That is an interesting point. He was, or still is, I forget the exact details of this, the head of administration at the Southern Air Temple, and then he sort of takes a break from that to sort of act as Kyoshi's secretary and to guide her to the places that she needs to be guided to. He has not got his arrow tattoos, and it's said that he's in his early 20s. So I think this is a kind of an interesting point, because in Avatar we're typically used to dealing with nearly every bender of note that we encounter is a prodigy and is effectively a master in their, like, by their teens. Here, I think we get the sense that just like he is said to be like a skilled airbender, but we never see any of it. So I the impression I get is just that we're meant to view him as just being a relatively normal airbender who learns at roughly the rate you'd expect a normal bender to learn at. Not every character is going to be a prodigy. And yet, with Jinpa, it's purely an example of we never really see him in combat. He demonstrates a few sort of trick airbending moves at one of the functions that they go to. He's not really involved in the fight at the end. He's there, but he basically just gets targeted by Yoon in the middle of the fight at the end, and then takes a hit to save his bison. He doesn't really attack Yoon at all. He's just acting as support in the fight. So the impression I get is just that the philosophy aspect of him from the Order of the White Lotus, the fact that he's head of administration and then a secretary, he's probably not a super combat focused character ultimately, and that's fine. So it's one of these things where, like, do we rate him highly because he's like had, you know, as a airbender, a young airbender character, he's had like airbending training like his entire life? And this will be interesting to compare to, say, let's even bring in someone like Milo, who's super young, but you have to rate highly on the basis of the few times we see him bend. And this is where we get into the idea of, like, he's actually not overly hyped up. So he probably isn't going to place super highly. Then we get to Jasa. So Jasa is Kyoshi's mother, of course. So she is a master airbender who got her tattoos relatively young. I think that's the exact wording that they use. She was highly regarded as an airbender. She became Daofei and one of the leaders of the Flying Opera Company, a noted Daofei group in her day. And, you know, that can't be stressed, can't be undervalued. That even though, as it says here, her airbending suffered from a spiritual taint after she became Daofei, because obviously she becomes a bandit in the Earth Kingdom. It's very different than being an air nomad. It affects her bending, of course, a very spiritual art. She made up for the lack of power by using fans, and this is, of course, why it is significant that Kyoshi uses fans, because they're actually meant to remind her of her mother. So that's pretty cool. And then, yeah, the group was super notable back in the day because of her leadership, because of the skill of the rest of the group. But you get the sense a lot of it is down to her leadership and her skill as well. Again, it's unfortunate that she's a character only spoken about sort of in the past, because of course she is dead by the time we have Kyoshi in the Kyoshi novels. So we don't get an explanation of like exactly how skilled she is. But I think you see this distinction here of like Jasa, more skilled than Jinpa, just on the basis of like, got her tattoos young, highly regarded, and so on. So that out of the way, we can go back to the list here. So we have 10 spots to go on, and we've eliminated Lahima already because we don't know enough about the character. So I think we probably need to fill in some of the top spots first. I think we just have to get that out of the way, otherwise we'll be here forever. For me, the top spot has to be between, I'd say, Tenzin and Gyatso. I'd love to include Kelsang, but just because we don't see him sort of actually bend enough, I don't quite know if I'd go this high. And then, like, the Gyatso stuff, I think he is very enhanced by the fact that we have this, like, display of his feats across the cards, and not just on the basis of, like, he theoretically did this thing, just us trying to sort of retroactively explain why his body's there in 103. So it's a kind of an interesting one. But Tenzin, you have to just treat as being like sort of the master airbender in terms of the amount of scenes we get with him bending. He gets to demonstrate the type of skills that sort of Aang could have demonstrated if we had gotten content with Aang when he was older. He, to me, is the true sort of master airbender, and that you can see the fact that, like, he has the air wheel as sort of his extension of Aang's air scooter, whereas like Aang, when he was older, went more in the direction of like the giant air scooter. And it's stuff like his fight with Zahir, who, Zahir is a good fighter in general, but he shows the difference between a master airbender who learns the right way versus just a martial artist applying his skills with airbending. That's a very skilled fight. And it's one of these things where, like, Gyatso is also sort of implied to potentially be Order of the White Lotus. So do you give him the full, old master credit, applies knowledge from the other nations that we tend to value quite highly in these type of situations? We probably have to bring spirituality into play a little bit. I wouldn't really downvote too many of these characters here just on spirituality, just because in terms of sort of power level, or whatever way we're talking about it here, there's only so far I think you can go with the spirituality thing, because otherwise we're saying like Jinora should be like one of the top 4, and unfortunately I don't think she is. She's probably an example of a character who's maybe too focused on the spirituality side of things and maybe not enough on the combat physicality side of things. So, Kelsang should be notable, of course, because he has all of the spirituality stuff plus the physicality to back it up. Gyatso, we don't actually know how spiritual or not he was. Just that, like, he was involved in the training of the Avatar, so I guess it wasn't that he was bad at being spiritual or anything like that. It's certainly an interesting one, because you have to give Tenzin a lot of credit for just the sheer amount of fight scenes he gets involved in. Like, things that come to mind for me are like Tenzin versus, say, like the Mega Tanks. Like he's the one who stays in the fight the longest over a lot of the other characters. In Turning the Tides, he gets to be very impressive, obviously, when he becomes the leader, but then when he gets the backup from everyone else, he just like gets straight under a Mega Tank and like shoots it into the sky, and that's a heavy Mega Tank. And it's stuff like that I think you can't undervalue Tenzin all that much. I definitely think top 3 is some combination of Tenzin, Gyatso, and Kelsang. Jinora, I don't think is on the list until we're probably in the like 4 to 6, maybe even 7 territory. Purely because she doesn't have that many feats of like combat-based airbending. That, you know, she gets to lead the big tornado at the end, like her siblings as well. She gets to be very impressive against the equalists, you know, when they come in, and she stands out. She gets to be in that leadership position by the time we get to book 3, and, you know, Kai is advocating for her to become a master. And it's great. Like, you have to value the fact that you can put the T next to Janora's name. So she's going to be, like, high up, relatively high up on this list. The other thing we have to keep in mind is that Zahir is going to break in somewhere in the middle of all these tattoo-based characters. I think he's going to be the only character who disturbs the list from just being, how many is this? 6 tattoo master airbenders in a row. So Zahir is going to have to fit in somewhere in the middle of this, because we are treating this as Zahir with flight. I don't feel any reason to disqualify him or just treat it as Zahir without flight or with flight, because if it was Zahir completely ignoring the flight, then yeah, probably we're looking at him probably just about making the end of the list. With flight, while I personally don't think the ability is like that impressive, I think it still has to be brought into play that him having flight makes up for the fact that he doesn't quite have the same like airbending go with the flow, because he can just go off the ground whenever he wants. So it gives him the sort of dodging abilities that like sort of proper airbenders actually have. And while especially against other airbenders, I don't think flight means that much, because they can just blow him out of the sky. Barely any other fighters are going to fight against Zahir with flight the same way that poisoned Korra in the Avatar state did. That fight worked perfectly for Zahir because he could just stand there as the Avatar state charged at him and just toss her into the mountain. So there's that. I definitely would want to lean towards Tenzin, because Gyatso, like a lot of what we see here, is very, very cool, very skillful. But you have to also be like, Tenzin has shown the ability to do a lot of these very same techniques. Aang has shown these techniques. Now, it is the case that, of course, Gyatso trained Aang. Aang trained Tenzin. So it's a line of benders who would all have, I suppose, relatively similar techniques. I would just give Tenzin the edge just because I don't think we should be treating, like, say, astral projection from Jinora as being anything that really affects things like all that much here, because it's directly just not a combat ability. Most spirituality isn't necessarily. And Tenzin, it's not like he's anti-spiritual or just, isn't spiritual, like, at all or anything like that. It is just the case that he isn't Jinora. He's not one of these, like, guru type characters. So there's that as well. And I just think, like, there's so much evidence with Tenzin of, like, showcasing how skilled he is. Like, just look at the fight with Zahir and the fact that there is a stage of that fight where it is like Tenzin versus like all of the Red Lotus, and he still puts up a pretty good fight until like Pali, of course, comes in and of course means Tenzin has no chance. But he just the fact that he was like surrounded by Ghazan, Minghua, and Zahir, and still sent them flying a little bit and forced them into a situation where like they needed the backup from Pali, the character with like the most destructive like ability that we have in the franchise. Gyatso, obviously super high. I'm inclined at the moment to be sort of like, I think it's Tenzin or Gyatso for the number 1 and 2 spot, and then I feel like it's sort of at this point sort of has to be Kelsang at number 3, because I think Kelsong's above Zahir even with flight. Afiko, we maybe don't learn enough about to place him higher. So there's stuff like that. So I kind of want to put straight away like Kelsong here. Oops. We'll just put the T in here as well. So that's going to be our first placement, I think. I just don't want to... it feels weird to be placing a character where there's only one major feat that we know about him. Super high compared to like Tenzin, where he's like the master airbender of his series. And then Gyatso, who is the sort of old master in a way. So I suppose we'll come back to Tenzin Gyatso, but we're basically saying Tenzin Gyatso are 1 and 2 in some order. So where do we go from here? So I think just below Kelsong, I suppose it has to be, we have to start talking about Jinora, Afiko, Jasa, and Zahir, I think are the best characters that we have left. Again, this is where it gets really tricky, because I think it probably is Afiko or Zahir next. This is where it gets kind of tricky, because Afiko, like from the cards, like is super skilled, and I think he comes across to me as skilled enough to handle Zahir, especially because like Afiko has the same skill as Zahir with the bending air to people's lungs. Jasa, I think it probably is potentially like Kelsong 3, Afiko 4, Zahir 5, and then we're maybe having the Jasa and Jinora discussion potentially. So I feel pretty confident with that. Afiko comes in at 4. So 5, 6, 7. Afiko. So yeah, let's clear out some of these characters here actually while we're here. Just let's just strike through so we know who we've already placed, so we have this better organized. Okay, so there's that. Afiko, Kelsang. Yeah, so there's that. So yeah. This is tricky. 4, 5. And then yeah, I think this has to be Zahir or Jasa. I think you have to put Jasa above Jinora just about, just because I think Jinora doesn't... Oh, hello. You're really eager to get involved here, aren't you? Okay, let's try and continue. Yeah, okay. So, talking about, yeah, I'm thinking it's kind of Jasa. No, sorry, Zahir, Jasa, Jinora. It feels bad to do this to Jinora, to have her sort of below Jasa, who we don't really know much about. But you do also have to value not just the time with Jasa before, because you have to value the time of her like before becoming Dao Fei, but also that as a Dao Fei, she was still able to do quite a lot, while like not having her full power level. And just sort of like that battle experience of like as a bandit type character, in a way. So I'll just put that in for now, and we'll see where we go, because we have to get the list in place to some degree. So if we do Jasa here, Jinora here, and then if we just say that that's dealt with. Okay, yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute. We've placed here as well. Strike that through. Okay, T is has master airbending arrow tattoos. And it's just notable with airbenders because it's the only one of the elements, of course, where it's like so distinct that is the case. So yeah, I think just, you know, Zahir has too much evidence of him being a skilled fighter, and even though he doesn't use his airbending skills in the same way as the rest of the like proper air nomad characters, he does enough with it that I think you have to put him ahead of sort of a character who maybe just about got her arrow tattoos, then went down a very different path in life, but was still notable. And then I love Jinora as a character. If you've seen my content, you probably know that I really do as well. And I don't like that I feel like she has to be placed sort of relatively low down. Again, being in the top 10 airbenders in the series is not a problem or anything like that, but it feels weird. Like, again, she is more emphasized for her spiritual aspects rather than her combat abilities, and that I think the thing that probably hinders her is just that, especially in book 4, when we get to see her as a master airbender, and even in the comics, like, we don't get to see her display her skills all that much. And when we do, a lot of the times it is just to use astral projection rather than, you know, particularly her skills necessarily. Like, you have, you know, again, her leading the group tornado, that ultimately is the thing that really gets in the way of Zahir. You have Opal and Jinora together creating a rather large tornado that keeps Kuvira at bay and sort of saves Korra from being killed by Kuvira. But a lot of the rest of it, like, she doesn't get to stand out as much in the fights. And in the same way that sort of like Jaisa is based a lot in sort of like theory and how she is kind of vague where exactly her abilities are, the same kind of goes for Jinora. And this gets into the idea again that like airbending as an element emphasizes spirituality quite a lot in universe, but here we're trying to sort of do sort of the powerful characters list. We're going to talk about spirituality. It'll be more a factor, I think, in the waterbending list, but I think that's roughly where we have to go with that. So that's that, and then yeah, that leaves us with Iki, Milo, Bumi, Opal, Malu, Kai, Daw, and Jinpa to fill out the last 3 spots, and then we'll get to addressing 1 and 2. So the big thing here is obviously like, okay, Milo is very young, but he is very skilled. And I think in the future he's going to be incredible, like really, really incredible. One of the best airbenders we've seen. I think he's just going to be absolutely insane when we get there. Iki, I think, is like, again, roughly the same. It's kind of unfortunate that like Jinora of the 3 kids here represents, of course, the spirituality more so than the physical bending side of things. Milo is more the physical side of things rather than the spirituality. And then Iki's kind of in the middle of the two of them, where like she's not really said to be particularly spiritual. She's more of like the strong personality, like as we see in like the Calling when they're searching for Korra. Like we see her, you know, personality really get to shine. Like there is moments like, yeah, in the comments there, like that she technically is in the lead of the air scooter race, and like they all get their chance to shine in like turning the tides. So there's that, but then there's also like just this thing of like Bumi, Opal, and Kai are all like the next 3 of the new generation of airbenders, where like Bumi obviously is very, very late coming to bending, But in book 4, Tenzin trusts him quite a lot and puts him on the missions, and he has all of the military experience, which is then backed up with the training. And he's obviously passionate about becoming skilled at airbending because of the connection to his father. So that's something. But we're probably not quite talking about Bumi here yet. Maybe just with regards to the age. Opal and Kai probably are roughly the same, because they're both sort of the prodigies of their kind of generation. They are both the two characters who are revealed to be airbenders and take to it the quickest. I'd probably say Kai is potentially the one who's like the absolute best of them, but I'm saying that purely because Kai was winning in the obstacle course in Original Airbenders, and they did Original Airbenders before Opal even came over. So I do think if she was in that episode, it probably would have been the two of them fighting for the win. But there's probably, I think, just maybe a little bit more evidence from the show to show Kai being a super strong, like, physical bender. So I'd be like Kai over Opal wherever we're talking about them. And then I think it's pretty fair to say that Daw is not going to make it onto the list. The likes of like Daw, Otaku, like Kuon, Ryu, those type of characters, the other guys who get airbending with harmonic convergence, they're not in the same range as these characters of like these kids, prodigal kids who have been training their entire lives, and then the three prodigies sort of the new era. So Daw unfortunately is gone. So there's that. And then there's this really weird situation where like I think Jinpa probably has to go, just on the basis of like I said here. Where do we have him here? Yeah. He seems to be emphasized more for this aspect of him. His philosophy, his membership of the Order of the White Lotus, and being the head of administration at the temple, more so than his skills. Like we have no evidence of him in combat. Other than the book does mention at one point he is skilled. So, you know, if we saw any of it, I'd be inclined to rate him quite highly because he's kind of like he's in his prime. But it's also significant that Jinora got her tattoos like shortly after the age of 10 type thing, and he's still in his early 20s and hasn't got it yet. Again, it's different eras, like but maybe there's a lot of people there's a list to get the tattoos or something like that. Who knows how exactly it's organized, but there's that. So Jinpa I think has to go here just on the basis of we do not see him fight. So Jimpa's gone. Tenzin and Gyatso, I'll just sort of what will I do here, I'll just highlight them here as characters we're covering as like they're the top two. So again, we have Iki, Milo, Bumi, Opal, Malu, Kai. I'd be very inclined. I'd love to say Milo next, but I do think he is too young. This is probably the case where he ends up just feeling maybe a little bit lightweight to be justified this high up in the list. This gets into the weird situation of like if Kai and Milo had a fight, like who would win? Like Milo probably has it on the skill, the technical aspect, just because he's been training longer and his craziness gives him an advantage. But you then also have to keep in mind just the physicality of like Kai being much closer to his prime, whereas Milo is like what, 8? I think he's 8 as of like now in the comics and at the end of book 4 or something like that. That's pretty young, and they obviously show him as being like really, really skilled, but I just struggle with that a little bit as well because like, you know, Tenzin gives Bumi the mission over Milo. Now, admittedly, it's more of a military mission, but still. So there's that. And yeah, like it unfortunately is a case where it's definitely Milo above Iki just on combat basis, I think. And then the question is really like, okay, Bumi, Opal, Kai above Milo? I actually just really struggle with that. Because, sure, these characters have only had 3 years of airbending training, whereas like Milo has had those same 3 years plus however long it was that he was training in airbending before that. But he's also really young, like 9 years old. I think the chat confirmed there. That's unfortunate. Like, again, I don't want to super undervalue a character because they're so young. And I do think Boomy's going to be incredible when he's older. Sorry, Milo is going to be incredible when he's older. I don't know. And then Malou is also difficult. Malou is incredibly difficult as well because, again, has a lot of training behind her. But I don't think her skill set stands out as much. Like, that's pretty nice there, the Hurricane Vault. That's a pretty solid move to be able to push an Earthbender back like that. You know, that's nice enough, but as we said, you know, Alphiko's one was much better. You know, ankle breaking gust against an Earthbender. It's a nice skill set. And obviously the experience here, like 10 years of fighting, you know, guerrilla fighting, I suppose, against Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation soldiers on the outskirts of the war. But still, that's experience that has to come into play, that she has become a bit of a legend. And then, like, that's skilled. Like, Aang does that. It's impressive when Aang does that. That it looks like she's deflecting, like, blast from a bunch of different characters. So, of who we have left, yeah, I think it has to be Malou. I think it's either Malou, Kai, or Milo. And I'd be very inclined to go with Malou. Just because of the experience, and then her moves seem pretty in line with what we've seen a lot of the Air Kids do. So yeah, I think I feel pretty confident about that. So we'll go Malou next. So that's that. That's format. Okay. Then 2 more slots to fill out between this group of characters, and it's like, yeah, is it just Milo Kai or Kai Milo, or like I think really any combination of Kai, Opal, and Milo is probably where we go next. Chat seems to be going for. There's kind of a mix between a lot of Milo fans in chat, but Kai is like. There as well. I feel pretty confident in going like, okay, Kai. Just on the basis of like 8 probably is a little too young, and Milo's such an oddball character. It's so hard to predict like what way he goes when he's older, a little bit more mature. So there's that. And then if I'm putting Kai here, it feels bad to maybe like slot like Milo in between Kai and Opal when Kai and Opal are like roughly the same. So I'm kind of like Opal Kai, sorry, Opal Milo. I'm not sure. Not. I don't know. This is a tough one here for obviously the top 2 spots. You know, which way do we go? Opal, like she has defeat with Jinora. She teams up well with Korra and Jinora at different points to do airbending moves. Milo has, you know, his Milo state move, but again, it's just to take it like an equalist or 2. In the end, I suppose with Milo, like, okay, we're maybe getting drawn in a little bit with the hype because he's like unique. Like, what are his actual moments that we actually see him do bending? That's the thing of like, he doesn't really have that many outside of the turning tides moment in book 1, and then it's like it's sort of kind of count on your hands the number of moments he has like after that. Like he gets moments to shine, and they always make sure to have his scenes be unique, but I don't know if that quite goes past Opal, who like moments after learning airbending is able to like get between her mother and aunt and like send their rocks flying back with airbending. And this comes into the idea of like your bending kind of tends to grow with you, and I think Milo probably is just a little too young at this point. That I think Opal, even though she doesn't quite have the extent of training behind her, probably has the power. So I kind of feel like I want to go with Opal. Like, yeah, the paint thing with the Colossus is like a cool idea. Obviously, it's speaks to his personality and so on. But I think this has to be Opal. And unfortunately, Milo's the odd man out at 11. But I think he's a pretty clear 11. It's a weird one. It's a tough one. You know, you can make the case for Milo as well. If Milo was just a little bit older, perhaps. So, yeah. Then finally, it has to be Tenzin versus Gyatso for the number 1 and 2 slot. This was the other big kind of debate issue. And I think this comes down to what I think tends to be often the discussion among fans when it gets down to these sort of things. It's the old master versus the character who maybe isn't quite old enough to be the old master of airbending in Tenzin, but has like 10 times as many scenes of him bending. And it's like, okay, Gyatso's performance on the day the Airnama genocide comes in, where he is killed at the end of it. That's important to keep in mind. It's unclear how long he fought for, but if you take the cards and the story into play, he obviously fought from outside the temple back into the temple and then into that area in 103. That's quite a day's fighting. But then Tenzin has the variety of, like, he defeats Zahir, puts up a good show against the Red Lotus, gets to, shine against, like, equalists. He's the first one to get a hit in on Amon, which is a very, very, very big deal, to attack and actually send Amon flying. That's pretty notable. It was a bit chaotic, but still, Tenzin got that hit in. Against all the mecha tanks, like some of the scenes I cited earlier on. It's just an unfortunate one where, like, this is really super close. But the point I'd almost make is that I feel like Aang goes on to potentially surpass Gyatso, just because Gyatso trains Aang to become a master at 12. And then we obviously don't know when Tenzin got his tattoos, but still, Aang, the prodigy Aang, trained Tenzin. And then the point in chat obviously is like, when does the comet come into play? I don't get the impression that in these situations here that he's against comet firebenders. Like, again, the art is kind of subjective here, but like that doesn't look particularly large in terms of a comet attack. Same with these. So I get the impression this is before the comet comes in, but still, it is still pretty notable. So yeah, this is ultimately just going to be down to personal preference. It's like Tenzin on the basis of we clearly see it, Gyatso on the positioning of the character suggests he is potentially the best we've ever seen ever. It's kind of a weird one. So look, when I did this list a few years ago, I put Tenzin here as number 1 and Gyatso second, and I feel like I kind of just want to do that again. And then there's a point in chat there. Yeah. Tenzin thought Jinora, who got her tattoos younger than Aang did, which is pretty notable. The card game was like 2005, so it's before book 2. Like, the card game doesn't even cover anything past like episode 11. I don't think. I think the Great Divide is about the furthest into the show that they go, if I remember correctly. Because like there's no cards for like Zhong or anything like that. Which is kind of interesting in terms of like Kinto, who we'll be talking about in the Waterbender list. But yeah, I think this has to be this. I think it has to be Tenzin, Gyatso. 2, yeah. And look, the thing with these lists all the time is that, look, it's interchangeable to a degree. 1 and 2 are super close. We're saying like 8, 9, 10 is super close. Jace Janora is also a super close pick. You could make the case on different days that like Afiko could be better than Kelsong. Zahir with flight maybe is up a little bit more. But I think that's a nice list. I don't think there's anything like too controversial with what we have here. Like Tenzin, the evidence is there to big him up as like one of the better airbenders we've seen. Gyatso, on the legend of him. Kelsong, sort of mix of his one major feat and also just his positioning as like a Team Avatar member from the past. That's pretty cool. Afiko as more of a villainous airbender, but who trained in the right way. That's pretty cool. And then Zahir, yeah, the only character who doesn't have like tattoos to break the list of tattooed members. Jace, Janora, Malu, Kai, Opal. That seems pretty solid. Like, you know, Milo, Iki, Boomy miss out, Jimpa, Daw, those type of characters. But for the most part, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, it took us an hour, but it's the first stream. We're still figuring out how to do things here. So yeah, let's jump into the Waterbender list here. So here there's much more characters here, but again, I think we'll be able to get rid of more of them quicker. So yeah, straight away, we are, like we said on the rules, we are not going to be considering the Bloodbender characters here. So the bending at all times Bloodbenders. Where are we gone here? So we will be, unfortunately, straight away taking out Amon, Yukon, and Tarlok. I just think it's too confusing to try and judge these characters with their special ability, which they are born with and can use at any time, and just say that it's banned for no real reason. When, you know, it just takes over the discussion too much. Is the main problem with psychic bloodbending. In that, like, it's like Amon versus Katara. Well, Amon is going to grab Katara in his bloodbending grip. Sure, Katara might be able to break out of it once, but he's also able to defend himself with his waterbending, and it's really, really powerful. And then can just do the bloodbending grip again. That just because you broke out once doesn't mean you can do it twice, which is obviously what happened to Mako. So that's the main thing that you have here, is that every fight involving one of these three characters has to revolve around the idea of how do they avoid getting captured by the bloodbending grip in the first place, and then acknowledging that they're probably going to get hit with it, can they do anything after that point? And the answer typically is no. It's the same as the combustion bending situation as well. Not to mention, based on like Tarlok's evidence, they're pretty good waterbenders as well. Like simply the Tarlok Korra fight, I think, gets across that you know, they're super skilled even without their bloodbending. So there's that. And look, there's a massive amount of waterbenders within the series here. Some of them are just not going to make it onto the list. They're just in no way in the discussion for top 10 bender. Like characters like, say, Melina. I don't think she shows enough to be a top 10 bender when we have, like, even these three characters removed, like Katara, Hama, Hugh, Paku, Unalak, Minghua, Kaya, Eskadesna, Tonrok, Tano, Kirima, Amok, Wadawat, Tagaka, Tulok, and of course Dune Tho. So yeah, there's characters like them, the two like what are they, waterbender kind of builders from like North and South, you know, they're reasonably skilled, but you know, they're not breaking into the top 10, you know. So you know, there are, I know, they're absolutely acknowledged, there are other waterbenders out there in the series, but there's no one else really there, I think, for the most part. So yeah, what are we down to here? So 8, so 16, 17 characters left. So we are going to have to get rid of some of these straight away. So yeah, we'll cover Kinto, just so we have an idea of who he is. So Kinto is this northern water tribe guy. I think he's meant to be a bit older than Sokka, maybe a year or two. And he's a prankster. The basic idea is that he's a prankster, but he's sort of a cruel-natured prankster. And the Northern Water Tribe don't really like him, so he's kind of left there to travel on his own. And the basic story of this is that it's actually quite interesting. It seems like it's basically, there's a book 1 episode where Kinto encounters Aang and Sokka separated from Katara, or Katara's off doing something else, because Katara's not on any of Kinto's cards. So these two encounter him on their own, and he just causes them a lot of chaos. So you can see here's his sort of Zen-elemental shiny card, Aquatic Tendrils. He's able to wrap the two of them up with water and keep control of them. Pretty important, pretty impressive. Here's his signature technique, Churning Stomachs, or Gut Wrencher, as we'll get to in a minute, which is obviously, that says right here, one of Kinto's favorite pranks is to slosh his victims' insides. So it's got combat application in terms of just like, imagine like starting off the fight and just immediately doing that, upsetting their stomach. It just put them off a little bit. Crystal Rampart, a nice block against Firebender attacks here. Immobilize, he trapped Aang in a ball of water. That's quite notable. You know, he's a bit of a show-off, as we see here. He's a braggart and a show-off. Make himself look cool, so there's some cool surfing stuff going on here. Showing some like movement abilities on the water. There's his card, the Cruel Trickster. And yeah, he was shunned by the Northern Water Tribe for his much-spirited and dangerous pranks. Bubble Burst, so you can see there's a sense of like, okay, he attacks Sokka with this kind of bubble of water that he makes kind of burst and sends water everywhere. It seems pretty cool. And then it seems like they just end up trying to flee from him, and he tries to get them with this pretty big water attack here. So, you know, that's decent scale, but we have seen other characters kind of go that big before, so it's not like wildly impressive. And then you can see here some ice-based techniques. Frost Blade, we've never really seen someone do that necessarily, just like a full-on melee weapon out of ice necessarily. Tonrock does it quite a bit in his fights, but it's more of like blunt force than anything. But Frost Daggers, so some kind of more lethal type moves, can cause injuries. Frost Spears as well. And then Water Lasso, kind of Water Whip style things. There's the Gut Wrencher again. Avalanche, Steam Blast, High Seas, pretty big move there. You know, it's a nice combination of techniques in that he's obviously been trained up north, and he's got quite a nice skill set. Better than some waterbenders, not as much as others. It's an interesting one. But yeah, this is obviously during very early book 1, like it's in or around the Great Divide time. Can't really be much further on from that. So this is like, if Katara was there, it's not necessarily a thing where she would have defeated him at this point, because it's before her training. So that's an interesting one to consider. But yeah, that's Kinto. He's the only new Water Tribe character that we have. So I think I need to explain the Kyoshi Water Tribe characters. So we have Kirima, Amak, Atuat, Tagaka, and Tulok. Do and Thor, we're just there to fill in the rest of the list. So yeah, we'll go over here. So water. So Kirima is the first character to teach Kyoshi waterbending. She is a member of the Flying Opera Company, the same Dao Fei group as her mother. She's capable of a technique called misstepping, which is the waterbending version of the overall general technique of the company, which is that combination with like dust stepping, and then there's like jet or flame stepping that Rangi uses for firebending. And then of course airbenders naturally just have it, and it's basically the idea of being able to jump higher and move sort of into the sky off the ground like steps. So the earth version of this is that you make really tiny pillars of dust under your feet, just enough that so that you can step on it and move to the next level and make the next pillar. The same thing for waterbending. You make a small little stream of water that you just make sort of solid enough to stand on, and you move up. So very agile character. There's specifically a scene where she demonstrates like how super flexible that she actually is. And then she's also noted for her precision as a waterbender. She can heal, but she says it herself, she's not the best healer. So she only knows the basics of healing. Now, Kirima, unfortunately, is another character who, in the Kyoshi novels, we don't actually see bend all that much, in that she is involved in the final fight with Yoon, and before she gets taken out by Yoon, which, again, there's no real harm in that. Everyone's going to get taken out by Yoon, given how powerful he was. The only thing she really gets to do there is that she and Wong team up for a combination attack. Now, her water blast is powerful enough to knock Yoon off his feet, but it only worked because Wong deflected it with Earth. And that's really the only kind of thing that happens. They just describe her in this fight as firing like torrents of water at Yoon. That, she forces Yoon to dodge, but I don't get the impression it's like the next coming of the best waterbender ever type thing here. So skilled in terms of, you get the idea. She's sort of this waterbender rogue. She's left the water tribes and has applied her bending and trained herself in a way that works better as a bandit. So focusing on the agility, the flexibility, precision, and that's what she's able to help Kyoshi with. The few times they work together to do bending, it's Kyoshi does the heavy lifting and she just keeps the water in shape. I maybe in line towards the bottom of the list, but I don't really see her making a claim for the higher up spots. That, to me, there's nothing super distinct about her outside of misstepping in terms of how she's presented in the books. Amok is very interesting because he is noted to be a master waterbender and also an assassin, and he was chosen by Jeonju to be Yoon's waterbending teacher, which speaks for itself. That how incredible this guy is, that Jeonju values this guy's skills, and Jeonju is super incredible. So for him to pick this guy to train Yoon when Yoon was thought to be the Avatar is notable. He is killed in one blow by Tagaka, who we'll talk about. Now, it is a surprise attack. It does take him by surprise. It's pretty brutal. So I wouldn't undervalue him just because he was killed in such a sort of shock way. He was really lured in by the ruse that Tagaka had going on and got taken out. We never really see his skills in action, but he trains Yoon to be a killer, an assassin himself. And that's kind of interesting. So he is a master, and he has this extra edge, which I would value quite highly. He knows lethal moves and stuff like that. That adds something onto him that needs to be considered. It's so difficult where we're going to be sort of maybe analyzing waterbending styles, but we can't really do that with this guy other than, I guess he's going to be somewhat in the range of Apaku, potentially. I wouldn't quite... I'm going to say Apaku ahead of Amok, but that's what I'm basing how I sort of judge where Amok's level is at. It's sort of Paku a little bit of a step down, but also with assassin skills. Ottawat's interesting in that she's I think absolutely, so it's probably the most powerful healer we've ever seen. Helped Kyoshi to master healing. She has this unique technique where she can cool down the temperature of the body to slow down the processes of the body, including if someone's dying. And this is described as being a very delicate, dangerous technique where you have to have incredible control to be able to do this and just result in the temperature coming down and not actually freeze parts of the body, which Kyoshi then demonstrates to us, of course, which is how Kyoshi kills Yoon, is using that technique overdone, which is freezing people's bodies, organs, and so on. So there's that. It's implied in the book that she knows at least some combat waterbending, at least enough to sort of protect herself, because she does go with Kyoshi at a certain point in the book to basically act as her backup if she needs it. She doesn't really end up needing it, but she does go there with her. So it's not the case where like, okay, healer, and then she happens to also be a master waterbender from a combat perspective. This is a character who, is solely known for their healing, but also can defend themselves if required. So that's an interesting one. The list is combat based, but we're not gonna like completely devalue everything else. With Ottawa, I ultimately don't quite think she'll make the list just on the basis of that, but it has to be noted in terms of like, if the Northern Customs allowed women to be trained in combat waterbending, she probably would be on the list somewhere. That sort of a thing. And like, where do you exactly put that? But anyway, Tagaka, leader of the Fifth Nation Fleet, I suppose prior leader, because she's defeated eventually. So she's a successful pirate leader, gaining control of much territory, including defeating the Earth Kingdom Navy in a battle, and one-on-one combat defeating the Admiral of Ba Sing Se in battle and claiming his sword for herself. She's also skilled with the sword as well. Skilled waterbender, though she often pretends to be weak to gain a big advantage when she then shows her true strength as a master waterbender. And again, she's a powerful waterbending master from a line of powerful benders. And then she does kill a mock with a surprise waterbending blow. She does a very large scale waterbending move to free all of her hidden ships from the ice, because she has this giant meeting with Yoon and everyone else on an iceberg, and then reveals that she's had this like whole situation planned out. So she's very clever and intelligent as well. She is the one to also take out Kelsong's glider with ice needles, which they note in the book she makes so small and tiny that it's very difficult for Kelsong to avoid them. He can't just block them like bigger icicles, but that's just a kind of cool little distinction. She does defeat Yoon one-on-one, but everything is in her favor. Since the battle is on an iceberg, Yoon only has a tiny amount of earth to work with, basically a riding slab that's only enough to make into an earth gauntlet. So she basically just, like, after a minor fight, freezes him in ice, and that's Yoon out of action for most of the rest of the fight. But it's unfortunate, but like off screen she's kind of taken out, and it's just explained that she is eventually captured. Kyoshi uses the Avatar state to bring Earth into the fight. Jeonju jumps into action and takes out Tagaka's fleet. Then Heiran and Rangi are able to free Yoon from the ice. And then it's just said that 3-on-1 together they were able to defeat and knock out Tagaka, and they have her captive. So the battle is not described, so they don't describe it as being a particularly, like, that it was a tough fight or anything like that. And again, it's a master waterbender in their element. So that needs to be factored in, that she only really fights when the terrain is like utterly in her advantage and everyone else is at a disadvantage. The firebenders by being in such a cold environment, the earthbenders by not having any earth, and then she is careful to deal with the one airbender in the battle immediately. So she's got tactics, she's got skill, it's just to what degree that is. Again, it's that sort of, is a master waterbender but has the more sort of roguish pirate style, which we don't maybe know fully about. And then I have Tulok here, who's also stated to be a waterbending master like his daughter. I get the impression that she is better than him. I don't really see it any other way. Again, he's just sort of only basically described as just, it's a powerful line. So if we, and that's all the waterbenders that we have. So I unfortunately don't think he's going to be really in play, just because there's no information on him, and I think it would be unfair to place him particularly higher. Similarly, Duant, though, I'll just note them here as like, they know Foggy Swamp style. They are technically, I suppose, masters of their style. Hugh, Do, and Tho are the best of their tribe, but apart from a few unique abilities and the style being a bit distinct, they don't really stand out all that much. They've got the shoulders of gods, of course, to do their technique without injuring themselves every time, but that's what it is. So there's that. They're gone. Ottawa, I think, has to go as well, unfortunately. Again, we'll note how impressive as a bender she is with what she's able to do with healing, but I think for the sake of this list, she is just sort of like what could have been if the customs of the tribe allowed her to demonstrate her skills properly. So unfortunately she has to go away. So yeah, we're getting through these quite quickly. We have 20 I think characters here, so we're down 6, so there's 14 characters left. Okay, let's start placing some people here, because I think there's maybe going to have to be a bit of discussion about, like, say, Kirima, Kinto, Hugh, some of these characters towards the bottom who we might need to have a little bit of discussion about. So we'll start placing some characters, and like the Airbender list, I actually do think it's easier to start from the top. Tano unfortunately has to go. I completely forgot about this. He has to be noted. Like, we'll give him his due here, that he is the captain of a championship winning pro bending team. I don't think the Wolf Batch cheated in every single one of their championships. I like the idea that they potentially won the first one or two, but then started to get maybe a little bit lazy. He is noted as being a talented bender. You see that in what he's able to do. That he has, of course, that sort of over the line, breaking the rules tactics. But it means he gets to stand out actually compared to other waterbenders, because he's doing all of these subtle actions while trying to hide it from the referee. And while it's obvious to everyone what he's doing, it's still unique as like a really subtle application of bending, that he's able to cheat so carefully and so on. So the pro bending style is good. It's quick, it's good up close. We just don't get to see him sort of do any of the power bending really. And yeah, obviously it's implied, I guess, he gets his bending back. Do we see it? I don't think we ever see it happen, but obviously the implication is that he at some point off screen would have got it back, I guess. Oh no, wait, he would have had to have gotten it back, because the wolf bats are in the video game, which is set after book 1. So for him to participate in that thing, he had to have get it back. So yeah, so he did get his bending back. Again, did they go through the list of every character who got it taken away and if he got it back? I'm not sure, but either way, the point is, like, even if you treat it as like, okay, maybe he doesn't have it back, we're still basing it all on the times when he did have his bending. So he doesn't quite make it here, but it's a pretty cool skill set. Now, let's start to play some stuff. For me, with the 3 powerhouses out of the way, I think the top of this list it's either Katara, Unalaq, or Paku as number 1. I think they are the 3 that stand out above all of the others. I don't really see anyone else as being quite on the level. I think Minghua is sort of just not quite in that top 3 type area. Escadesna I don't quite see as being quite there. Same goes for Tonrock, not quite being as good as his brother. Kaya's not quite there. Tagaka, I think, is more sort of maybe in line with a Minghua type level. Kirima is probably even below that. That's my impression. Amok is kind of hard to place. So the question really comes down to, okay, how are we valuing these characters against each other? It's Katara versus Paku versus Unalaq. I would be inclined to go Katara, Unalaq, Paku. But I could also see Unalaq, Katara, Paku, if we don't want to overly, say Katara becomes super, super incredible in times when we haven't seen her yet, when she's older. I did say in the rules I'm accounting for Prime to a certain degree. So that would be Katara, like, I suppose in her like mid-20s, sort of like old friends poster Katara. What level is she at there? And I do think that Katara goes on to become like the best in the world, like without question. If you told me right now that it has to be between Katara from Imbalance, which is sort of as far as we go, we are into the franchise with her, versus Unalaq, I'd actually say Unalaq, just purely on what we know. But because I am accounting for Prime to a degree, I'll give it to Katara, just because I think that is exactly what the character is meant to be. She goes all this time knowing she's a waterbender but having no training, and the level that she gets to after getting that training, the experience that she has and is able to get over the course of the series, is really, really valuable. So there's that too. Just the fact that she gets to fight such a variety of benders over the course of the series. She does get to learn about, or at least encounter, every single style of waterbending pretty much imaginable. And even if she doesn't like incorporate every part of it into her style, she still uses it to her advantage, and just having that experience. So there's that. And then, yeah, Unalaq is one of these characters where because some people don't like the character, they tend to not really look into just how skilled he is. But this guy's absolutely one of the top 3 waterbenders. Like, I don't know how you can not watch his fights and realize like the extent of his power. That, look, there's obviously him versus his brother, and that's really clear that like he beats Tonraq, and we rate Tonraq like relatively highly, but I do think Unalaq is just a level above Tonraq. Look at the way that fight goes. Tonraq is all about sort of, having his waterbending augment just how physical he is. He wants to get in close, physical, kind of beat you up close and finish the fight that way. And Unalaq just handles him perfectly. Like, waits until he gets in super close. The move he does to just send his brother flying backwards is extremely notable. That he doesn't just create like an ice pillar out of the ground, like a simple thing, like basically it's ice, but it's basically like an earthbending technique almost. He makes a spiraling icicle to add extra like impact into it. And then there are so many other examples as the series goes on, of him doing moves that really just get across how powerful he is on like another level. Even just what he's trying to do with his children to try and break through the portal. It's, look at the power that he's kind of streaming through, and then when he gets really frustrated, it's like the multiple tendrils that come in. I like how they just show Unalaq's abilities as like, he'll add that sort of spiraling element of like multiple streams of water together to add power, and then he adds an ice drill to the top of that to make it like even more powerful. So there's that. So yeah, there's that. With Hama, people are saying like, okay, the bloodbending thing, like, why have I eliminated these ones but not Hama? We're not really factoring in, like, say, Katara can do bloodbending or Hama can use bloodbending, because it's such a specific scenario of the moon being out. And look, in that scenario, these two characters are the ones who have the experience. That's fine. Hama's here because she is really, really skilled. Whether you think she's too old by the time we encounter her in the Puppet Master to be like top 10, or you do have to rate her very highly on her flashback sequence. That she was the last left standing of her entire tribe. the last one to be captured. That takes skill to get to that level. There is a reason she is the one to invent the technique of bloodbending. And even though it requires specific circumstances, it took a skilled bender like that to do it. In the same way that metal bending required someone on Toph's level to invent, even though, as far as the series has gone, anyone who's an earthbender can theoretically learn metal bending if they put the time into it. So Hama's here because she deserves to be here. I don't think we're quite talking about like her as being maybe top like 5 or 6 or something like that, but she deserves the credit, absolutely. So that's my take on it, is that, like, you know, I can say it's Katara or Unalaq for the top spots. I think they offer something more than Pakku. Like, I think Katara is definitely ahead of Pakku just on the basis of Pakku to me is sort of like the definition of the old master. Like, he is a master northern style waterbender, and he's got like a little bit extra because like he's a member of Owl, and I suppose there's some element of him incorporating other stuff into it. Not that we really see that. Again, there's a little bit of a sort of contradictory thing of like he's super strict on the northern traditions, but you know, he's a member of Owl, that sort of a thing. He to me just represents, like, you know, the level that a bender needs to get to be in the upper echelon as a waterbender. So I do think he's number 3. I think we can actually just put that in right now, is that Pakku's number 3. Unalaq and Katara, like, ultimately what I said last time I think was Katara and Unalaq. There, like that. So if we, again, we can discuss this. We can maybe change it around if we need to as we go forward. But let's just strike through these ones. And Unalaq. Okay, there we go. There we go. So yeah, we've still got a lot of characters left for what, 7 spots, and we've got like what, 10-ish characters left. So 4. Who is 4 just below Pakku? This to me is of the characters left. No, not quite. No, maybe. Not quite. Not quite. Getting closer, not quite. No. I think it's between Minghua and Tagaka, honestly. Maybe Hama. What did I say in my initial list that I did? Because I did sort of trial runs on sort of paper just to get a sense for how I'd formed the list. So yeah, I said Minghua next. And I think Minghua deserves her spot here. I think that's where I'd put her. I feel pretty confident about that. Minghua. And the thing with Minghua is that some people are going to want her rated higher. Like, why isn't she in the top 3? My thing with Minghua is that Minghua is really, really strong. But against these super high level waterbenders, they are going to be the characters who do take advantage of the fact that she doesn't have arms. And she is not a character who, in her combat style, tends to use a lot of water. So if you can engineer a situation where you can force her into having to drop the water arms, you can get the advantage over her. That's what Mako was able to do in their second fight. Admittedly, being a firebender, he was able to have that advantage. But the key point that I always make is that from the fight with Kaya, we know that other waterbenders are capable of bending the water that is part of Minghua's arms. So it's not like she has just this like perfect control over them that other waterbenders can't manipulate. I don't think it goes as far as to like a bender could just be like, water bend, boom, I now have your water from your arms. I'm guessing basically that up to the length of a normal sized arm, she has very strong control over it. But anything beyond that, I do think is fair game for other waterbenders to bend. And Kaya, who I think will make the list just about, was able to do that. And I definitely think the likes of Paku, Unalaq, Katara would be able to take advantage of that. Also, with Unalaq, you have to keep in mind, they're both Red Lotus. He is a higher position than her. And, you know, we don't know Minghua's backstory, but it could involve the fact that maybe he thought her. Not that that's pure speculation, but, you know, it's just, there's that as well. So Minghua, I think, comes in here. Like, the key traits that she has, of course, is that when she gets going, and when she has the environment that suits her, she can just zip around the place. She's one of the most agile characters that we see, because she can use the arms like to swing around on. And then she's super agile and can transition the water that she does control to pretty much do whatever she wants with it. You know, she has that octopus form that she can go into and that sort of thing. But I do think that there are weaknesses there that some people tend to not really consider, such as the fact that, you know, in a contained environment like the final fight against Mako, she wasn't able to super fly around the place like she was in other fights. And he was really able to take advantage of her because he knows where she's going to be, because she can only move so much. So she had to block his blasts and use up her water. And experienced masters like Unalaq, Paku, and Katara are going to be able to take advantage of that. So there's that. So that's Minghua. So what are we doing here? Yeah, strike through. Okay. Next up is how many spots do we have left? So 6 spots left, and we're thinking, at least I'm thinking, next is Hama, Tagaka, or Tonraq. I definitely think what am I trying to say here? I think at this point, let's see, who do we have here? So 6 characters. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Can we quite eliminate anyone? So I think we probably can say goodbye to Kinto at this point. Because let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, he's not going to make it, I think, onto the list in the end. So we can say goodbye to Kinto. Does Hugh go as well? I think so. He's probably too one note, I think. The plant bending's really, really cool. But it's... And he is like a master and like a, you know, guru, you know, to a degree. But yeah, I think he probably goes as well. But, you know, it's cool that he's somewhere there within like roughly the top 15. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's like 7 left. Is there anyone obvious who drops out after this point? Hama, Kaya, Tonraq, Kirima. Is Kirima gone at this point? I think is she the cutoff for the list here, that she is the 11th? Because I don't think she's better than Eska Desna, not better than Hama, not better than Kaya, not better than Tonraq. Yeah, I think Kirima's gone. Yeah. So yeah, unfortunate. Definitely a character we needed to see more of, to see a more distinct style. So I suppose like this confirms to us the list. These are the characters who are going to be on the bottom of the list here. It's just about picking out who's who. Who's, I suppose, like, yeah, at this point, who's the weakest of those left? I would definitely say Tonraq's ahead of Kaya. I'd put Tonrock ahead of Eska and Desna. I would put Tonrock ahead of Amok just because I don't think we know enough about and Eska Desna. The reason I just have them side by side here is just because, is there anything particularly distinct about one over the other? I just think it would be like they'd have to be placed like right next to each other, and it would just take up an extra spot on the list. So it's weird as well because like they're always tag teaming. The only time we really see these guys band is just like sort of working together. They're both still really skilled, and like having their father as a master, it's like interesting. But I think for the number 10 spot, is it Kaya? Like I'd kind of almost be thinking at the bottom here, it's like Amok, Kaya, or maybe Eska Desna. It's kind of tricky. Or can we go to 5 next? This is where it's so tricky because like I suppose I want to talk about Tonrock here. I think Tonrock is really, really skilled. Like if you watch his fight scenes, I think he has a pretty distinct and unique style. Like I said, it's very physical and like aggressive. It's not really about like the technique behind it, kind of like his brother, but I think it's pretty effective what he's able to do with it. Because he comes relatively close to getting a hit in on Unalaq. He sort of, I suppose, at least scares Unalaq a little bit, but Unalaq's technique advantage kind of comes over. But the fight against Zahir on top of the mountain, like he does some pretty cool stuff. Like he's agile, and I suppose this is where just like his raw physicality is also like one of the more notable ones as a character as well. That if it does get in close, like there's not many characters like sort of stronger than him. So I think there's that. I definitely would have Tonrock over Eska and Desna because I think that it's only minorly shown, but he definitely handles the two of them in the streets of the Southern Water Tribe capital relatively well until Unalaq arrives. So I think he definitely deserves his spot ahead of the two of them, because I think this gets into the situation where it's like we probably have seen more scenes of Eska and Desna fighting, but I would say Tonrock is better overall, just because these two, which I'm not, I have them here together, but I'm not rating them as a duo. It's basically just Eska as an individual, or Eska and Desna. What am I saying? It's one of them basically. It's Eska or Desna, and on their own, I don't think they quite stand up to Tonrock. So that's why I'm saying Tonrock over Eska and Desna. Amok, I suppose Amok is an interesting one where on earth do we place him? Because we have no distinct look at his bending style outside of the fact that he's a master. But you would say that Tonrock's a master, Kaya's a master, Hama's a master, Tagaka's a master. Like, everyone's a master at a certain point. So just Amok being a master with the assassination edge, where does that place him? He's good enough to be an Avatar's teacher, but I don't think this is quite the character where we go like he's Kelsang level. But it also feels weird to place him that low down. But I probably do think he's either 9 or 10 here. Because I'm thinking that I suppose Tagaka Kaya is actually like an interesting one. I think Tagaka's good enough to where I'd rank her higher. Like what do I have here about Tagaka? Like I have quite a massive list here about her. Like strong leader in kind of multiple battles at sea, clever, has defeated notable people in combat. Not that we know if he was that strong or anything. is from a powerful line. Skills with the sword, we're not going to rate that too highly because she's primarily a bender, but it's notable. She handles Yoon while doing this move. I think that has to be pretty good. So I think Tagaka's relatively high up here. What way do I have this on my original list, actually? I have actually Tonrock rated quite highly here. Do I have Tonrock next? I'm not sure about that at this point. Is it Tagaka next, actually? I'm not sure. Tagaka at 5? I think it has to be either Tonrock, Tagaka, or Hama. Let me see. Tagaka, Tonrock, Hama. Yeah. Hama's the interesting one, I think, just because, like, do we know enough? Like, obviously, the flashback. She's the last one left standing. A whole invasion by the Fire Nation. That's notable. Highlighting that she was obviously the best of her generation back when the Southern Water Tribe actually had Waterbenders. And then she still maintained, I think, the majority of her skills. Like, her losing to Katara in the Puppet Master episode like she does, I don't think is any, like, slight on the character. Like, because I think there's a reason we basically are saying Katara's number one here. The power level difference between them of, like, given how old she was, I think is perfectly fine that she was just stronger. Like, she obviously has all those sort of old master, deft, clever moves. And that's what she teaches Katara, the how to survive as a waterbender in an environment that is not all water, ice in your advantage. That's pretty notable. And I suppose that's the thing against her and Tagaka. All of Tagaka's feats are pretty much her as a pirate on the water or fighting on an iceberg. Whereas Hama sort of demonstrates she held her own on her home ground with the environment advantage against firebenders. And she basically secretly captured people from a Fire Nation town for ages without being caught. I think we kind of have to give it to Hama here. I feel pretty good about that. So Hama, yeah, I think Tagaka next. Did I spell that right? Tagaka. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Tagaka. Then, so if we take them out, so Hama gone, and then if we take out Tagaka, okay, that leaves us with Eskadesna, Kaya, Tonrock, Amok. I definitely think Tonrock at this point. Q. And then, yeah, the fight between these three is going to be quite interesting. Kaya, Eskadesna, Amok. Amok's a bit of an outside one. So, Kaya or Eskadesna, that's really interesting. I did watch Kaya's fight scenes before coming on the stream. She demonstrates some pretty cool moves. Because she holds herself well against Zahir and against Minghua. Now, obviously, she ultimately loses to Minghua when Minghua uses the full extent of her power. But Minghua's obviously, like, we have her here at number 4. There's no real problem with that. And I think for a character who you wouldn't necessarily associate as being, like, the most combat focused, she really demonstrates quite well how skilled she is. While Eskadesna, they are probably brought down by the fact that they're only ever as a team. But they're also very young, and they do have room to improve, these two. And we want to sort of view to Prime. But obviously, is that hindered now that Unalaq is gone and can't teach them? I'm not sure. Because, like, the idea realistically is that they're already sort of at the master level, roughly. And then all the characters sort of, like, above this level are like master plus level. because master means very little. I don't know. It's a tough one because they're obviously skilled and demonstrate some of the same level as their father, but not everything. But they are really notable. Really notable. They're a threat to Korra when they come after her 2-on-1. Obviously, the more comedy, like Eska coming after Bolin, is quite funny, but powerful. It's really tough. It's really tough. Because obviously Kaya goes 1-on-1 with Minghua and nearly beats her. Eska and Desna go 2-on-1 against Minghua and get frozen and like instantly like defeated by Minghua. Obviously 2 different environments, 2 different situations, but one is a clear, one shows up a better fight. Like the experience of Kaya here. Now obviously we don't know what exactly Kaya's combat experience is necessarily, but the fact that she held up so well against Zahir and Minghua speaks to that. It's weird. Like I'd say definitely on potential, probably Eska Desna, then Kaya. I don't know. This is very tricky. But I kind of feel we have to do like a mock here, just out of like he deserves to be in the top 10 because of the combination of skills, but there's not enough information to like say you're above anyone else. Let's see, how does this look? You know, Kaya directly trained by Katara, who is the best waterbender, and then, you know, the second best waterbender trains the other 2. I don't know. It's a weird one. It's tricky because like you can't just base it on like the way like one fight goes versus another one. So yeah, this is really the last kind of decision here: Kaya or Eska Desna at 8 or 9. Very difficult to do. I kind of want to go Kaya then Eska Desna, but that also feels like I'm being very negative towards Eska Desna, who I think it's one of the more notable ones, is that like they actually managed to deal relatively well with Mako and Bolin, who are a noted bending duo. Admittedly, they have some of the terrain advantage in most of their fights because of the ice field type thing, but that's still relatively notable. Yeah, I'm just about going to say this. Kaya, Eska... Desna. That to me is the way to do it. It's... Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. It differs a little bit from this. I think I had my initial version, I had like Tonrock a little higher up. I didn't have Hama placed as highly. I didn't have Eska Desna this high up, but you know, I think this works out. Yeah. So there's that. I think my initial list that I did, I think not counting everyone, is Katara, Unalaq, Paku, Minghua, Tonrock, Tagaka, Amok, Hama, Kaya, Hugh, Kirima. Because I think I actually forgot to put Eska and Desna on it initially, and it was like, oh, how could I forget about these 2? Something like that. So in reflection, yeah, you probably needed the discussion to be like, yeah, Amok, there's not enough information with him. So there's that. The Airbender list, I think, if we look back at this, is this basically what I had before? Tenzin, Gyatso, Kelsang. I actually had Zahir ahead of Afiko, but I actually like this better here. Jaisa, Janora. I had Jinpa higher up, but it was just kind of like, yeah, we don't see him fight, so there's that. Yeah, and then yeah, I had the same trouble that we had discussing this of like Kai, Opal, Malu, Milo. Those like 4, like where do they come in against each other? That was a weird one. But yeah, I think it went roughly the way I expected. But these are the 2 easier lists. These are definitely the much 2 easier lists. Airbender and Waterbender are the most distinct ones, where like, you know, obviously the top of the list are easy to form, and then there's there's typically a pretty strong drop off in terms of like super high quality at around the 4, 5, 6 mark, where like we have Tenzin, Gyatso, Kelsang, Afiko, and then it's like, okay, is it here? And then kind of newly master airbenders. With this list, we kind of with this list, you have the top three, which are a clear trio. Minghwa's sort of in a category to her own, and then you're into the sort of like next level down. Earthbending is going to be crazy, because this is where obviously the Kyoshi novels are going to affect things the most. And we have Yoon to talk about, we've got Jeonju to talk about, and they're going to be characters we're properly talking about, like high up here, like sort of similar to Kelsang, but obviously it's the Airbender list is so light it doesn't mean that much, but that's going to be tricky. The Firebender list is just going to be tricky because it's always been tricky. Iroh versus Ozai. You have that group of Firebender characters that's like Iroh 2, Zuko, Mako, and then you can bring in like a few other characters as well who are like there and thereabouts. How do you rate them against each other? And now Rangi and Heiran come in as well on that list. Zhu Ping-an potentially is fighting for a spot on that list. There's that. So those two lists are what is planned for the next stream, which I haven't fully locked it into place, but realistically it will be the same time as this stream, but like next week. We'll be doing the same thing, just the other two lists, of course. So working together to form them in roughly the same way that we did here. The difference is that I probably won't have as much preparation to do, because I don't think the trading card game matters like at all, because JoJo certainly isn't making the list. And I think maybe like Boomy will be able to back up a little bit more with some of the trading cards, but that's really about it on that side of things. That's that. The Firebender one I think is probably going to be the most difficult. The absolute bottom of the Earth list might be tricky, but I think Earth is just the most like stacked lineup of characters that we're very quickly going to hit all like this character's super notable by the time we get into that scenario. I'll aim to do it in roughly the same time. It was the first stream. We were working out what to do. Maybe there were certain points where we lingered on it too much. I did spend, I think, quite a while going through this stuff, which we won't really have the next time outside of some Kyoshi novel stuff. Admittedly, we're going to have quite a detailed section on the likes of Jeonju and Yoon, because they'll be like there and thereabouts for the top of the list. Heiran and Rangi, I think, will be more towards the bottom of the Firebender list, but still there. It's a tricky one. Like I actually have done my sort of tentative lists already for Fire and Earth. Let's see. Yeah. Top 5 seems pretty good. Top 6 maybe complicates it a bit. Yeah. No, this is the thing. I think top 7 Earthbenders is the best of the best type thing. And then spots 8, 9, and 10 are a little bit more open. But the top 7 for Earthbending is just like elite, absolutely elite. My Firebending list. Okay, yeah. There's just a lot of like the big debates of bending power analysis sort of stuff. So there's that. Like Azula's exact placement. Zhang. How do we handle someone like a Sozin? They're the kind of bigger debates there. There's that. So the thing is, I suppose, for content coming up and just like the live streams in general, like obviously I've this one and then the next one planned. And after that, I'm not really sure what exactly the next stream is going to be, but the idea is just that, hey, I've done this now, and we can do it for other stuff going forward. Like, if a big piece of Avatar Studios news happens, that maybe, I can do a live stream sort of discussion to go into it, and we'll see how that sort of works. That's sort of why I've kind of planned this out and stuff like that. And then, yeah, we can do other stuff. Like, at some point, I think we'll probably also want to do the non-bender list as well. Non-bender top 10 list. Spirits suggested there in the chat. That's a really tricky one to do. Just every spirit is so different. It's like, well, Ravavatu, Tui Law, and you're getting to some weird choices of like, how on earth do you compare like Glowworm's power against like Twee's power? Because like Glowworm, like trying to even comprehend in your head how he fights with the whole slime pool of slime thing, it's kind of weird. But that's the general idea. Obviously, like, I don't really have a lot of Avatar videos planned at the moment because there's been no news really recently. Obviously, we're expecting like Suki preview pages in the next week or two. We're expecting the ATLA Funko Pops to be announced like at any point now. And then there's also just like all this news that we're waiting to happen. Like Korra Comics, the Free Comic Book Day book, they said they revealed the cover for that soon. Merchandise that we're still waiting on. Like, there's stuff I'm eager to see happen, but it's like it could do it happening a little bit sooner rather than later. But yeah, that's been that. So yeah, there's the Airbender list, and I'm pretty happy with this, how it went ultimately. Yeah, the discussions went pretty well. Obviously, the big thing for me on the sort of technical side of things is just that, like, only having one monitor makes this really awkward to do, because I have to like look at the stream to see what I'm actually presenting, so that when I do the stuff like this, that I'm clear that I'm actually presenting what I'm saying. So I definitely will need to invest in a second monitor at some point, just so I can have all the sort of, this is what's happening on the stream stuff on one of the monitors, and just be able to focus on the list on one of them, and present to you guys what I'm doing clearer. But yeah, I probably will put the lists up somewhere. Like, obviously this stream will be a video on the channel as like a video on demand type thing, but I probably will also make sort of just like I'll probably make like a small video that is just talking about the list, and it be very short, like a relatively short video that just has the two lists and like basically link to the stream where I formed it. That's roughly my plan with that. But I think I'll do that once we're through both streams. For now, yeah, I guess I can put up just like a picture, I suppose, of just the lists that we have somewhere online, probably on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. Yeah, we'll get to that. So I guess we'll probably do at least 2 more streams. We'll do the non-bender list as well, but I guess that would be a third stream. That can maybe be a shorter one with maybe some other topic as well. We'll see where we go on that side of things. But yeah, that's most of this list. But yeah, this one I don't think there's too much to get sort of like angry about. Like can often happen in this. I definitely think it's more the Firebender and Earthbender list that people will be more up in arms about. So yeah, I think that's more or less the stream. That's most of what I wanted to cover. So yeah, I guess thanks everyone for joining me on this first stream. Obviously I saw at least one of you in one of the kind of practice streams I did for the members only. But yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Not used to having to do it all live, but it's relatively similar to what I do in some of my videos. But yeah, I guess that's been it. Thanks for watching this stream, and bye.